Alphabet is being sued by the Department of Justice, and so let's dive into that in this video and just figure out what exactly it means, especially for the people who own the shares of Alphabet in this environment. And so as you guys smash that like button, let me run that intro. What's up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. And so you guys may have heard in the news today that Alphabet did get sued by the Department of Justice, and so let's dive into it. So you can see that the Department of Justice has sued Google, and effectively they're looking to break up their online advertising business. And I'm going to dive into this and explain exactly what's going on, because a lot of people don't necessarily understand the ad spending business, which happens to be a core competency of mine, at least in the recent years. And so let's dig further into this article. So the Justice Department is seeking to break up Google's business in brokering digital advertising across much of the internet. And essentially what they're doing is they're alleging that Google abuses its role as one of the largest brokers and suppliers and auctioneer of ads placed on websites and mobile applications. So this is for like the World Wide Web, guys. So there's a couple of ways that you can advertise on Google's platform, and I'll dive into more detail in the latter half of this video, but just to give you guys a high level idea, is you can advertise on Google search, you can advertise on YouTube. That's essentially what's called Google's own properties. But what you can also do is you can use Google's services, their AdWords services, and advertise on other websites of other publishers that are using Google's software or Google's ad supporting software to push ads on their own content. And so this is what they're going after. But as you can imagine, this is a small piece of the overall pie at Alphabet. So they go on to say that Google uses its domain over digital advertising technology to funnel more transactions to its own ad tech products, where it extracts inflated fees to line its own pockets at the expense of advertisers and publishers it purportedly serves, the complaint read. So that is the Department of Justice's position. So what exactly does Google say in this situation? So you can see that a Google spokesman said that effectively the lawsuit is attempting to pick winners and losers in the highly competitive advertising tech space. And so they're saying that the Department of Justice is doubling down on a flawed argument that would slow innovation, raise advertising fees, and make it harder for thousands of small businesses and publishers to grow. Now, I would say that this comment here is actually very truthful, and I very much agree with it. And I will show you guys examples of actually how if you sort of stop this, you're going to impact small advertisers. And in fact, there's actually one advertiser who, or allegedly an advertiser who actually talks about this and provides a great example. But first, in order to understand all of that, you guys have to understand sort of like how advertising works for Google's network properties, and so like their member network properties, not necessarily Google's own. And so here's how it works. So you have a user, so me or you, we visit a website. That website's owned by a publisher that's not owned by Alphabet, okay? And what that publisher does is they can actually make money on showing advertisements to the users that visit their website. However, the publisher doesn't have access to advertisers, nor do they want to make contracts with advertisers or anything like that. Plus, it'd be very tough for each individual publisher to have agreements with many advertisers. So it's a lot easier to go through an exchange system. And so what the publisher does is they use what's called double click for publishers. And effectively what they're doing is they're putting up their ad space for sale. So think of like you selling your home. Well, you don't know who the buyers are, so you'll put your home up for sale on an exchange or like somewhere where you could advertise that it's available for sale. And so that would be like a Zillow or something, right? And so here it is. The double click for publishers is a place where the publishers can put the ad space up for sale, and then it gets transacted on the exchange, what's called the ad exchange. And actually, just pausing quick before we move into that, I just want to point out that Alphabet owns the double click for publishers app or program, so or software. So you know the publishers are putting their advertising space up for sale using a Google property or Google business. Now when we go to the exchange, notice that AdX is actually the exchange that Google owns or Alphabet owns. And so you know the publishers, they're using DoubleClick to put their ad up for sale, and then the ad goes up for sale on AdX. Now what's happening is the advertiser will buy targeted advertising using an ad buying tool, which is called DV360. And that's, again, a Google owned property. And then what that does is it buys the ads on the ad exchange. So the advertisers will set like a limit per impression. So like on YouTube, you'll make a certain amount of money per 1,000 impressions. And effectively, those impressions are bid for. And so, I'm a publisher on YouTube, and so I actually sell advertisements through a Google service. And of course, they take, I think they take 45% of it or whatever. So the whole point of it is that this system connects the people who have advertising space for sale with the people who are trying to sell advertisements or take out advertisements effectively. And so the problem is that Google owns the whole thing. They own DoubleClick, they own AdX, and they own DV360. And that's kind of the issue. The issue isn't that you can advertise on Google search or on YouTube. So that's not going away. The issue is that this is for like the open web publishers that team up with Google, or their DoubleClick for publishers. That's kind of where the issue is. Now, here's the thing. People can use other ad buying tools and other exchanges to push advertisements onto publishers that used DoubleClick to place the advertisement. So that is available. So you can sort of like bypass DV360 and AdX as well. However, it seems like the complaint is that too many of them, like a high percentage of people, are using DV360 and AdX. And so the question is, why are they doing it? We'll get into that next. So here's a complaint in a little bit more detail. Google's role as both the primary auction house for selling digital ads and an auction participant has led to calls for regulatory action. Okay, fine. And this article came out, like this particular piece in this video, this article came out a while ago. And this is when, Elizabeth Warren was running for president, and she had proposed unwinding the Google DoubleClick merger. And so, advertisers so Google came out and said advertisers use our technology to buy inventory on over 80 exchanges. Okay, so they're saying that we have one of 80 exchanges, or in other words, what they're saying is we make available many exchanges that don't belong to us. Interoperability across the ad tech landscapes allows publishers and advertisers to mix and match technology partners to meet their different needs. So once again, they're saying that the advertisers and the buyers can use different software owned by different people on the supply chain, essentially, to buy and sell advertisements. So it's not necessarily just an exchange area that's owned by Alphabet. So that's what they're saying. But here's the issue, and here's the question that I asked before. Why is it that most people are using Google services? Well, more than 90% of large publishers use the Google ad server DoubleClick for publishers. And the reason why is that using Google's DoubleClick for publishers is the only way to get full access to Google's AdX exchange. Okay, so there's something about Google's particular AdX exchange that's very valuable for publishers to use, and why they wouldn't want to look at other exchanges. And the reason for that is, and they're saying in this article, one reason is that it connects to yet another powerful Google product, AdWords, which draws on the company's dominance in search. So in other words, you're basically getting all the targeting data to target your advertisements appropriately. And so the ads would be more valuable. So as a publisher, I presume, I'm guessing here, I don't know for sure, but for a publisher, I presume that would be more lucrative advertisement. Thus, they would get more revenue if they use DoubleClick for publishers, and then they allow full access to, or they use Google's AdX exchange to transact or sell ad space. And here's how it actually works. So you can see that the user will enter in a query into Google search. We're all familiar with that. And then the AdWords system will actually place relevant ads for that Google search. And so what's happening here is that AdWords can help you as an advertiser show up on search. But remember, Google also allows you to advertise on websites that they do not own. So this, what you're seeing right now, is just Google's bread and butter. The government is not going after this because, as a small advertiser, you're using AdWords to advertise on a Google property. So that's fine. What you're going to see next, what I'm going to show you, is that you can use AdWords to advertise on the advertisement exchange, which will go to the open web. And so you can see that here. So instead of going to Google search, you can use AdWords, which plugs into AdX. And so then you can target advertise, or you can target users for specific types of publishers where those particular users would be attracted to that type of content. For example, if you have a website or you're a publisher for a website that only publishes articles about Ford F-150s or something, and it's a non-Ford affiliated website. Well, if you're an advertiser, say you're a small advertiser that only sells specific products for Ford vehicles like Ford F-150s, well, you would want to target consumers who read Ford F-150 publications. And so you could use AdWords and target them, target those specific customers or users through AdX, and then you would serve those advertisements to those specific people. So this becomes very valuable to small advertisers, because if they weren't able to use AdWords to target effectively, then they would be doing blanket advertisement. Advertising would become very expensive for them, and they wouldn't be able to target as well as they currently can. And so advertising would actually just become prohibitively expensive to the point where they just wouldn't do it. Some industries wouldn't exist as a result. And you guys are all familiar with all of those videos. I know you guys watch finance videos. You guys are familiar with all of that ClickFunnels type stuff on the internet. That's what they're relying on. They're relying on specific advertising to get people to get into a funnel and then eventually sell their product. And so the article goes on to say, for many years, Google's AdX was the only ad exchange that had access to this fire hose of ad dollars. Google now opens up AdWords demand to rival exchanges, but AdX continues to receive the majority of demand, according to people who are familiar with the matter. And so one point of tension for a lot of publishers is that Google, Facebook, and Amazon essentially own the whole market. However, we have to acknowledge that that pie, overall pie, is growing, and the piece that's owned by those three companies is shrinking as time goes on. And so it's interesting that the lawmakers do not mention that, but as time has been going on, they've been getting a smaller and smaller piece of a growing pie, which is why you're seeing their revenues grow every year. But the overall digital advertising industry is growing faster. So just keep that point in mind, guys. Now, you guys may recall I think this was in November, Google actually offered concessions to fend off the US antitrust lawsuits. And so what they did was they offered to split off parts of its ad tech business into a separate company under the Alphabet umbrella to fend off the most recent Justice Department investigation. However, the Justice Department officials actually rejected the offer and decided to pursue the lawsuit instead. So Google does not want to sell these businesses. They want to keep everything together, and they've, as a result, entered into this lawsuit. Now, as a shareholder of Alphabet, you're probably reading this news and saying, okay, look, the Department of Justice is trying to break apart Google or Alphabet. What does this mean for my investment in Alphabet as a whole? Well, the good news is probably doesn't mean that much. And I'm just going to show you exactly what the network member properties make up in terms of the overall revenues for the company. So you can see here, this is the model that the Patreons get access to, and you too can get access to all of the models, including this one for Alphabet. I also have Apple, Tesla, Alibaba. You can get access to all those models at that lower tier of the Patreons. And looking at this model, you can see that the network businesses, the parts that mostly relate to brokering and buying and selling of ads on other websites, generated around $31.7 billion in 2021, which only amounts to 12.3% of overall revenue. And notice that it's gone down from 16% in 2017 down to 12.3%. And if you get access to the model that the Patreons get access to, you can see that the importance of this segment is going to continue to go down. And in fact, at like year 5, year 6, I believe that it's going to go under 10% of the overall revenues. Plus, this is a part where analysts are saying is probably the lowest profitable business segment for the company as a whole. So, we have a lawsuit here that will take years and years and years to go through, and it only impacts approximately 10% of Google's overall revenues or Alphabet's overall revenue. So in other words, what I'm saying is you probably don't have to worry about this one if you already have a position in Alphabet. Now, if you do have a position, or sorry, if you don't have a position in Alphabet, or even if you do have a position in Alphabet, you might want to scale back the growth of the network member properties a little bit. I've already done that in my model. And so if you want to see how I'm thinking about the growth, you can get access to the model at the Patreon level. And for those of you who are already part of the Patreon, just go take a look at how I'm growing it out. I've already scaled it back a little bit to take into account for this, because we had talked about this previously, that it was potentially going to go through this lawsuit, and now it's going through. So we had already taken that into consideration. And so I think as more and more investors get an idea of how, somewhat immaterial this is, I think Google's shares will actually, or Alphabet shares will actually rise as more and more people gain that understanding. And of course, as we get more and more visibility into the continued strength of the digital ad spending market. It is struggling as of late. You're seeing these digital ad spending companies do layoffs. And so let's see how this plays out into the future. And you can see here's another illustration that's saying that an increasing number or a share of Google's ad revenues are coming from their own properties. Remember I showed you that Google search thing, and I also mentioned that YouTube is a large search engine as well, which gets a lot of ad spending. So, you can see that these properties, like the non-Google properties, are just less and less important to the company as a whole. I mean, they have strategically moved away from this, and I think by the time any lawsuits makes any impact, you're going to be well under 10% of the overall revenues for the company. And so I don't think there's a lot to worry here, but of course, don't rely on me. Do your own research, think and come up with your own conclusion as to what you think. And if you think I'm wrong, let me know in the comments. I learned so much from you guys because I really think that we have one of the smartest YouTube communities on this channel. Now, I found an interesting comment under one of the articles that I was reading to put together this video, and notice that, Joel said, I think if the government messes with Google's ad system, you'll get a result even more devastating than Apple cutting off its cookie sharing. And so a guy by the name of Andrew said, well, that's exactly the ridiculous spin that Google tried when Apple applied ad controls on iOS. Seriously, small businesses competing through online advertising. And here's where I think Joel absolutely crushed it with his response. So he said, so if ad companies can't build niche profiles of their users because the data has all become disaggregated, please explain how this helps small businesses. For example, let's say I developed a new backpack for holding babies. How can I possibly target my niche market through online means? This will raise my cost of advertising by a huge sum. We'll go back to the days where only the big players can afford advertising. We'll just go back to blanket advertising. You'll see a commercial on Ford trucks when you drive sports cars. Not that I'm in the finance industry, but I have many friends who have built fantastic businesses because of their ROI on advertising. Now, you guys might think that that's a bunch of bull and small businesses don't get access to this incredible amount of information and details as it relates to targeting individuals based on certain criteria. But I'm actually one of the people who actually did very well as a result of this. And so I'm going to show you next how I made $10,000 in just one day. So watch how I did this, guys. Now, this is just a picture I pulled off the internet, but just to give you guys an idea. So, here's a theater, and this is a comedy venue. So some of you guys might know that for fun, prior to starting a YouTube channel, what I would do on my weekends and evenings is I would actually do stand-up comedy all throughout Toronto. And what I wanted to do is I didn't want to compete against other comics to get on the Just for Laughs annual show. I just decided, you know what, I'm smart enough to create my own annual show. Like, I'm business minded, right? So I can compete with Just for Laughs. And so what I did was I picked the exact opposite month of the time that Just for Laughs happens, which happens to be a really good month to do a show. It's March, so the winter's ending and everybody's kind of looking to spend and go out. And then what I did was I actually spent $100 on Facebook advertising, where I targeted only people that had upcoming birthdays on the weekend of the show who were between the ages of 18 and 70 years old and lived within 25 miles of the theater that I had selected. That $100 investment helped me sell 500 tickets, or $10,000 in ticket revenue that night. And so I would not have been able to target that closely without having access to Facebook's ad targeting database. And so, I didn't do comedy to really make any money. So what I ended up doing was, I had my venue fees, which was a couple grand, and then I actually paid the artists more than what it cost to even rent the venue. And so, here's where some of the comics in the city of Toronto, and they don't make a lot of money. They actually got a really big payday, and not a payday that they generally get, even from a company like Just for Laughs. And so, it really showed that, me, a virtual nobody, could sell out a theater just by using specific targeting and just understanding who the comedy audience is in the city of Toronto. And if you have a backpack for carrying babies or whatever, if you understand your target audience and you know how to target them using these amazing tools, you can do very well. And so I agree with that guy who said that, you know, this will actually end up hurting small businesses. And I hope that the Department of Justice takes that into consideration as they take in other areas of consideration. Look, I'm not saying I'm an expert on the space. I'm not saying I'm right here either. All I'm saying is I am of the opinion that I believe that this could potentially hurt small advertisers if they make Google AdWords not available for the open web. But you guys let me know what you think. I might be wrong here. And with that said, you know, things are getting a little bit tough right now. However, Barron's actually offered 3 reasons or 3 things that have to go right in order for us to avoid a recession. If you've missed that video, you can get access to it right here.